There is a moment in human life that Carl Jung considered to be the most critical juncture. It's not a moment that happens once and then you move on. It's a moment that repeats throughout your entire life, getting progressively more intense and more demanding each time. It's the moment when you have to choose between being who others want you to be and being who you actually are. And Jung understood something crucial that modern psychology has almost completely lost. Most people never make this choice. Most people spend their entire lives being who others want them to be, and they call this life, they call this existence, they call this success. But Jung knew the truth. He knew that until you stop being who they want, you don't actually exist at all. This is not metaphorical. This is not poetic. This is a literal statement about consciousness and identity. When you are being who others want you to be, you are not conscious. You are not making choices. You are not acting from your own authentic center. You are being acted upon. You are a character in a script that someone else wrote. You are a puppet, and the strings are held by everyone whose approval you've learned to need. Let's talk about what it means to be who others want you to be. It starts early. It starts in infancy, really. Your parents have expectations. They have hopes. They have fears. They have unmet desires of their own. And they project all of this onto you. Your father wants a son who is strong and ambitious like he wished he could have been. Your mother wants a daughter who is nurturing and compliant like she was taught to be. Your grandparents have ideas about who you should become. Your teachers have expectations. Your culture has predetermined roles. And you, as a vulnerable, dependent creature, learn very quickly to read these expectations. You learn to sense what will get you approval and what will get you rejection. You learn which parts of yourself are acceptable and which parts must be hidden. You learn to perform. You learn to be whoever they need you to be so that you can maintain the love and approval and safety that your survival depends on. This is not a conscious decision. This is adaptation. This is the human organism doing what it needs to do to survive. And there's nothing wrong with this as a child. Children need to adapt. Children need to read their environment and modify their behavior accordingly. This is healthy development. But here's where it gets pathological. This adaptation, this learning to perform, this becoming who others want you to be, it doesn't stop when you become an adult. It continues. It becomes more sophisticated, more deeply embedded in your sense of identity, more automatic, more invisible. You've been doing it for so long that you don't even realize you're doing it anymore. You think that the performed self is actually who you are. You think that your preferences are your own when they're actually internalized voices of people who matter to you. You think that your choices are free when they're actually determined by the approval and rejection patterns established in your childhood. This is what Jung called the persona. The persona is the mask you wear for the world. It's the public face. It's the identity that gets presented in social contexts. The persona is useful. It's necessary for functioning in society. But the catastrophe, the psychological catastrophe, is when you identify completely with the persona. When you think that the persona is who you really are. When you have lost touch with the person underneath the mask so completely that you don't even remember that a person exists underneath at all. When this happens, you don't actually exist. You're an elaborate performance. You're a collection of introjected expectations and internalized voices and reactive patterns. You're not a person. You're a mechanism that has learned to respond to the demands of others in ways that secure approval and avoid rejection. You're sophisticated, yes. You can have a career. You can have relationships. You can have accomplishments. You can have a life that looks successful from the outside, but you're not actually experiencing any of it. You're not actually choosing any of it. You're not actually living. And the tragedy, the profound tragedy that Jung recognized, is that most people never realize this. They go through their entire lives thinking that they're living, when actually they're just performing. They think that their life is a success, when actually they've never even asked themselves what they actually want. They think that they're happy, when actually they're just numb to the absence of authentic joy. They think that they're free, when actually they're imprisoned by the requirements of the personas they've constructed. Jung understood that the process of becoming a real person, of developing a genuine self, requires a confrontation with this reality. It requires you to stop performing. It requires you to disappoint people. It requires you to say no to things that you've been trained to say yes to. It requires you to become unreliable from the perspective of those who depend on your performance. It requires you to take the risk that the people you love might reject you if they see who you actually are. This is where the real terror begins. Because the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear that you will be unlovable if people see the real you, this fear is not abstract. This fear is wired into your nervous system. It's based on real experiences. When you were a child and you deviated from the approved self, you experienced disapproval. You experienced withdrawal of attention. You experienced the threat of abandonment. That threat was literally life-threatening at that stage of development. Your survival depended on parental care. The threat of rejection was a threat to your survival. So your nervous system learned to be terrified of authenticity. Your nervous system learned to associate being yourself with danger. Your nervous system learned to suppress your authentic impulses and emotions and desires in favor of the performed self. And this wiring is deep. This is not something you can intellectually understand your way out of. This is something that has to be felt and worked through at a nervous system level. Jung called this process individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming yourself. It's the process of separating from the collective expectations and the internalized voices. It's the process of discovering who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning and performance. But Jung also understood that this process is not smooth or linear or comfortable. Individuation is a process of crisis and rupture, and death and rebirth. It usually begins when the persona can no longer hold, when the performed self cracks, when something happens that makes it impossible to keep up the performance anymore. It might be a loss, it might be a failure, it might be a betrayal. It might be the realization that you've achieved everything you were supposed to achieve and you're still empty. It might be the recognition that you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s and you have no idea who you actually are. When this moment comes, when the persona cracks, you're faced with a choice. You can desperately try to repair the mask and get back to performing. Or you can use this moment as an opportunity to finally ask the questions you've never allowed yourself to ask. Who am I actually? What do I actually want? Who am I when I'm not trying to impress anyone or secure approval? Who am I when I'm just alone with myself? This questioning is terrifying because the answers might be uncomfortable. You might discover that you actually hate your career. You might discover that you've built your entire identity around something you never actually cared about. You might discover that the relationships you've built are based on performing, not on authentic connection. You might discover that the values you've been living by are not your values, but the internalized values of people who've been dead for years. You might discover that you have desires and preferences and dreams that directly contradict the life you've constructed. When this discovery happens, when you start to see clearly who you actually are beneath the performance, you're faced with the most difficult choice of your life. You can choose to go back to sleep. You can choose to reconstruct the persona and get back to the comfortable performance. Or you can choose to stop being who they want you to be and start to exist as who you actually are. This choice is not made once. It's made daily. It's made in small moments and in large ones. It's made every time you have to decide whether to say what you actually think or to say what's expected. Every time you have to decide whether to pursue what you actually want or to pursue what you're supposed to want. Every time you have to decide whether to show your authentic emotion or to maintain the appropriate facade. Every time you have to decide whether to honor your actual needs or to subordinate them to other people's expectations. And each time you choose authenticity, each time you choose to be who you actually are instead of who they want you to be, something shifts. The anxiety might increase initially. The social consequences might be real. People might disapprove. People might withdraw. People might reject you. The life you've constructed might begin to crumble. The identity you've been maintaining might start to dissolve. But something else happens too. Something that Jung considered to be the most important development in human psychology. You start to exist. For the first time, you become a real person. Not a performance, not a mechanism designed to secure approval, but an actual human being with your own authentic desires and thoughts and feelings. An actual person who can make choices based on what you actually want rather than what you've been conditioned to want. An actual person who can have genuine relationships based on being seen and known rather than performing and impressing. An actual person who can do work that matters to you rather than work that conforms to expectations. an actual person who can take up space in the world as yourself rather than as a pale reflection of other people's desires. And here's what Jung understood that changes everything. When you start to exist as yourself, when you stop being who they want you to be, you become more valuable, not less. You become more interesting. You become more capable of genuine connection. You become more creative. You become more resilient. You become more able to deal with real challenges because you're not expending all your energy on maintaining a false identity. You become more alive. But you also become less useful to systems that depend on your compliance. You become less useful to family systems that need you to play a particular role. You become less useful to employers who need you to perform particular functions. You become less useful to cultures that need you to consume particular messages and adopt particular beliefs. You become unpredictable and unreliable from the perspective of those who depend on your performance. This is why so many people choose not to individuate. This is why so many people choose to continue performing, because the performance gives them a place in the system. The performance gives them approval and validation and belonging. The performance gives them a clear identity and clear direction. To stop performing means to lose all of that. To stop performing means to risk rejection and isolation. To stop performing means to have to figure out who you actually are and what you actually want with no external guidance or support. Jung understood that this is the loneliest and most difficult thing a human being can do. He understood that most people are not willing to do it. He understood that most people would choose the comfort and security of performance over the terror and freedom of authenticity. But Jung also understood something else. He understood that the people who do make this choice, the people who do stop being who others want them to be and start to exist as who they actually are, these people become psychologically whole. They become integrated. They become capable of genuinely loving others because they're not loving from a place of need for approval. They become capable of genuinely connecting with others because they're not performing. They become capable of finding meaning and purpose that's actually authentic to them rather than meaning that's been prescribed. And most importantly, they become free. Not free from responsibility, not free from the human condition, not free from limitations and pain and disappointment, but free from the internal struggle of maintaining a false identity, free from the exhaustion of performing, free from the anxiety of needing approval, free from the terror of being found out, free to be themselves. This is what Jung meant when he said that when you stop being who they want, you start to exist. It's a statement about the development of consciousness. It's a statement about the transformation from a reactive mechanism designed to secure approval into an actual person with authentic agency and choice. It's a statement about the most important journey a human being can take, the journey from the persona to the self. But here's the brutal truth that Jung also knew. This journey is not guaranteed. It's not inevitable. Most people never take it. Most people spend their entire lives in the persona. They perform their way through life. They secure approval and accomplishment and success within the system. They die having never been themselves. They die having never really existed. The question is, are you willing to take this journey? Are you willing to start asking who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning? Are you willing to face the terror of being rejected if people see your authentic self? Are you willing to disappoint people who have come to depend on your performance? Are you willing to let the false identity die so that a true one can emerge? Are you willing to accept the loneliness and the uncertainty and the risk that comes with becoming yourself? Because until you do, until you stop being who they want you to be, you're not actually living. You're performing. You're going through the motions. You're checking the boxes. You're seeking approval. You're maintaining a facade. You're not existing. You're just surviving in an elaborate disguise. The moment you stop performing, the moment you stop being who they want you to be, is the moment when you finally become real. It's the moment when you step out of the script and become the author of your own life. It's the moment when you finally exist as a genuine person rather than an elaborate performance. Jung spent much of his life studying this transition. He observed that it's the most important transition in human psychology, more important than childhood development, more important than sexual maturation, more important than any achievement or accomplishment. Because until you become yourself, until you individuate, until you stop being who others want you to be, you're not really alive. You're just an actor on a stage performing a role that someone else wrote. The role might be that of the successful professional. The role might be that of the dutiful family member. The role might be that of the spiritual seeker. The role might be that of the victim, or the rebel, or the caretaker, or the entertainer. It doesn't matter what role you're playing. If it's a role, if it's a performance, if it's not authentically you, then you're not existing. And the strange paradox, the thing that Jung understood so deeply, is that the moment you stop playing the role, the moment you stop performing for the approval of others, is the moment when you actually become more yourself than you've ever been. It's the moment when you stop running and start existing. It's the moment when you finally become real. This is what happens when you stop being who they want you to be. You start to exist, not eventually, not after you achieve something or become someone. Right now, in the moment you make the choice to be authentically yourself instead of performing what you think you should be. In that moment, you start to exist. You become conscious. You become real. You become a person instead of a performance. The question is whether you're willing to make that choice, whether you're brave enough to stop performing, whether you're willing to face the terror and the loneliness and the uncertainty that comes with becoming yourself, whether you're willing to let go of the approval and the validation that the performance gives you, whether you're willing to exist as yourself instead of as a character in someone else's story. Because that's the only real choice there is. Either you perform and remain unconscious, or you become yourself and start to exist. Either you spend your life seeking approval, or you spend your life being yourself. Either you die without ever having really lived, or you live as an authentic person, flawed and limited and real. Which will it be?